So good morning, good day, good evening, friends of EFD all over the world. Thank you all for joining us at this 14th EFD annual meeting, but it's the first virtual. We should have been in Kochi in India, and this morning I remembered why. If I look out, it's really, really gray and cold in Sweden, and the rain was pounding. So I think and I hope that next year we will be able to meet again in a sunnier place than this. But at the same time, much greater access. We have about 400 participants registered to this annual meeting, which means less emissions. And I think that if you are interested in joining virtual in the future, we're probably going to do that. But if you're interested in learning more about the next annual meeting, which we hope will be in Lake Victoria, please join us at the General Assembly on Friday at this time. I think I forgot to say who I am. My name is Gunnar Kjellin. I'm the proud director of the Environment for Development Initiative. I'm so happy to have this honor of starting this meeting. So I think I'll soon introduce our first keynote speaker, but before I do that, I know that there are many of you, maybe all of you, are really concerned about the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia right now. So I'll share with you an appeal that scientists in Belgium has developed to really focus on the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia right now. So with this very brief introduction to the annual meeting, I also have the honor of introducing the first keynote speaker. And I think I'd like to invite Dr. Urvashi Narain to put on your camera. Yes, there you are. Urvashi is not only a long-term friend of EFD and me, she's also a senior environmental economist at the World Bank. And I just realized now, checking her CV, that her professional history actually mirrors that of EFD. So Urvashi, she received her PhD at UC Berkeley in 1998. And that is actually the same year as our first graduate here in the PhD program in Environment and Development graduated in Gothenburg. That was Alemu Mekonnen. And then, of course, she moved on to Resources for the Future. And of course, Resources for the Future is the model for EFD. We felt that, you know, every country would need such an institute with the most brilliant environmental economists developing policy for countries to develop. So we were going to RFF for advice, but by the time that we finally started EFD in 2007, then Urvashi decided to move to the World Bank instead. And I think this might actually have been a sign of what we should have been thinking about at the time, because the tagline for EFD has for a long time been to make a difference with our research. In terms of policy and poverty alleviation and so on. And that's exactly what Urvashi is doing in her role as an environmental economist at the World Bank. And we'll hear more about this, what she does and how she does it in this speech today. And I'm particularly excited about this opportunity that she will also talk about how we could connect with her and the World Bank in their important work, because she's also the lead for this community of practice, a network of all environmental economists at the World Bank. So I think it's more interesting to listen to you, Urvashi, instead of me. So without further ado, I would like you to take center stage here, our virtual center stage, and provide us with the first keynote at the 14th annual meeting of the EFD initiative. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Gunnar. And it's absolutely a huge pleasure for me to be here. Thank you very much. I'm hugely honored to have been asked to do this. You know, I'm a huge fan of EFD, and as Gunnar mentioned, you know, I think there is such an opportunity for us to work together to get, for EFD researchers and World Bank teams to work together. And what I would like to do today is give you a little bit of a glimpse into the life of an environmental economist at the World Bank, so that we can start developing a better understanding of each other's work, so that we can then use that to identify how we could collaborate. And so that's really the spirit in which I'm here, to look for how we can start working together more. And in my presentation, I'll talk a little bit about that, put some ideas on the table, but I really see this as one of many conversations. So really delighted to be here. So could you put up my slides, please? So as Gunnar mentioned, I'm a lead economist at the World Bank. And today I wanted to share with you what a life of an environmental economist is at the World Bank. I'll share, my experience, obviously, because that's what I know best. But this should give you a glimpse of the kind of work that we do, and perhaps a better understanding will help with the collaboration. Next slide, please. So what I'll do is I'll give you a little bit of a sense of what I do. And then I want to spend the bulk of the presentation today talking about how I do it, because I think that is, to me, coming from RFF, that was a big switch in what I did. So I came as a researcher to do something a little different. And I just want to explain that to you. And then some ideas on how we could work together. Next slide, please. So before we begin sort of getting into the details, and I will talk about air pollution in India, which is what's the title of my talk, although I changed it a little. I wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of sort of what I call World Bank 101, because there is a very sort of regimented structure in which we operate. Sometimes I think there's a sense that the World Bank has more authority or more sort of power to determine what it does or dictate what it does. But I just wanted to also give you a sense of sort of the structure within which we operate and within which our country programs, which is really the bulk of what we do, are determined. So a few years ago, when the World Bank sort of reassessed its sort of mandate and goals, and came up with twin goals that we are all supposed to sort of work towards. And the first goal is to help countries end extreme poverty from the current, from at that point 18% to 3% of the world's population by 2030. And extreme poverty is, defined as the $1.9 per day per capita. The increased, and the second goal was to also, and this was new for us, because we were always focused on poverty reduction, but a new goal that was introduced at that time was to also boost shared prosperity. This was in recognition of the fact that growth alone wasn't leading to equitable growth. A focus on growth alone wasn't leading to an equitable growth where everybody was benefiting. And there was a need to really focus on what we call the incomes of the bottom 40% of the population as well. So another goal for us was boosting shared prosperity. Now, in all of this, you may wonder, where does the environment fit in? So the way the twin goals are expressed is often that the World Bank has to achieve its twin goals in a sustainable manner. And often our mandate on the environment side comes into what we call in this term of sustainable. But of course there is, this is a very simple version. There's many places in which environment comes into ending extreme poverty and boosting shared prosperity. But nonetheless, the focus tends to be the twin goals in a sustainable manner. Now, so this is sort of the overall vision and overall sort of structure within which we operate. Now, how do we determine what we do in each country? So here, country by country, right? The World Bank has operations across the world. And in each country, the way we begin to determine what we will do in that particular country, we begin with something called a systematic country diagnostic, right? This is an assessment of the current challenges in the country, the factors that are constraining ending extreme poverty and boosting shared prosperity in a sustainable manner. Now, this is an internal World Bank document that we create as our, internally in order to start understanding what are the challenges in the country and where is it that interventions are needed. Now, what we call the SCD then informs what is called the Country Partnership Framework, what we call the CPF. Now, this is determined. So the SCD is sort of an assessment of the challenges and what the country needs to do. The CPF is determined in partnership with a country, and the CPF, in partnership with the country or in discussion with the country will determine, okay, there's a, country needs to do X, Y, and Z. What will the World Bank focus on? Will it focus on X? Will it focus on Z? Right? Because there's obviously a need for selectivity. And so in partnership, in discussion, say with the Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Environment in a particular country, we will come up with a program for the country that is based on our SCD, but then it is determined in partnership with the country. It's a negotiation where it then determines for the next 5 years, these are the things that the World Bank is going to do. Now that's important because at the end of the day, all that, our research, our sort of where we can have impact on policy, all is determined by what is this broader program. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Okay, so this is the end of my World Bank 101. Next slide, please. So now let's move to, what is it I do? Now I have a number of things that I'm doing at the World Bank, but I want to focus in today on this issue, on a very large program that we have with Government of India on air pollution, our air pollution program. This is one of, I would say about 30% of my time is spent on this particular program. And what is it that we are doing? First of all, as you must all be aware, air pollution is a huge challenge in India, and the red that you're seeing on the map is showing you where the PM 2.5 mean annual levels of PM 2.5 are over 100. And WHO, of course, recommends that the mean annual levels should not be more than 10, right? So this is, a huge challenge in the country. And we are now working with the Government of India on a number of things. One, we are helping to shape policies and programs. We're also trying to help them implement air quality action plans. So some of, very sort of getting your hands dirty and actual working on implementation, not just on design and research. And then we also help to build capacity in a number of areas. And I'll get into the details of this, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview. And we're working at the national level with the central ministries. We are working in a number of states with a focus on 3 states in the really red part of the map and what we call the Indo-Gangetic Plain. And we also have a regional program that is bringing all of the states that share this sort of very high level of air pollution together. And so this is, this is where I'm at today. But I want to give you a sense of how I got here, or how we have a very large team who is working on this program. So how did we get here? And I just want to give you a glimpse into that, because that will give you a sense of what is it that I do. And I'll come back to the India program and give you some more details of what is it that we're doing. So next slide, please. So how did I get here? So today I said I'm working, 30% of my time is spent on working with Government of India on a number of issues around air pollution, and we hope that will help India tackle its challenge, right? So how did we get here? My journey to this point in 2020 really began in 2016. So around then, the World Bank released a report called Clean Air and Healthy Lungs. And this report was done by some colleagues. I was not involved in this report at all. So colleagues were looking at the World Bank portfolio, and they found that we were actually very low priority was being accorded to air pollution control by the World Bank and our client countries, right? So the World Bank's own lending portfolio, not a lot of resources were being devoted to help countries tackle air pollution. And in part, that was also because there wasn't a lot of client demand for this. And this report called for upstream work, analytical work, to strengthen sort of the economic case. So this report sort of highlighted that there was a need to create awareness both within the bank teams as well as in our client countries about this challenge of air pollution. So this is what then led so in 2016, I, along with a few co-authors, led a report that we published in 2016 called The Cost of Air Pollution. This report was done jointly with IHME, and some of you who work in the world of air pollution may know IHME is a global institute that produces the global burden of disease estimates every year. And we partnered with them because they were sort of the experts on the health side, and the World Bank could come in on the economic side, right? So we partnered to produce this report called The Cost of Air Pollution. And the real objective of this report was to try and strengthen the case, the economic case for action. Next slide, please. So what did we do under this report, and what were the main findings? So this report took sort of a global view of air pollution. We, first of all, and this is largely the work that IHME did, we estimated what was the total exposure of people to poor air quality, both ambient as well as from indoor air pollution. We then estimated what was the health impact from this exposure to air pollution, and then what was the economic cost that this was posing on countries. Now, you know, as you would have seen, and as our report showed, that air pollution is really a major health risk, right? This was sort of, this was being talked about, but not, you know, the World Bank hadn't come out and sort of talked about this, putting sort of its weight behind these numbers. And we found, for example, that 5.5 million early deaths in 2013, that is 1 in 10 deaths across the world, were actually caused by air pollution. Now, this in itself, right, I mean, very large number of deaths being caused by air pollution was, you know, should have been enough. But we felt that we needed, in order to sort of strengthen the case for countries to make action, to take action, we needed to put these numbers into economic terms. Now, you know, we often have to deal with, you know, finance ministries or finance ministers or planning ministers who have to allocate resources amongst many different priorities. And unless we felt that if we could put these number of, you know, the health impacts into economic terms, then it would help them see both what the cost was and then be able to compare what the benefits would be if they were to invest in the interventions, right? So this is where we came in, and we found, for example, that air pollution is also a drag on development. We estimated that the loss of labor income from the early deaths was about equivalent to 1% of global GDP. But if you looked at the loss of welfare, right? You look beyond just the income measure and look at the loss in quality of life. We found that the number was much, much higher, right? And this was equivalent to about 7%, I think, of global GDP at that point. And the report really was a call to action. And this report, next slide, please. Actually, let me, before I come to what was the impact of this report, let me tell you a little bit of a detour on, let me do a little bit of a detour on methodology. Now, you would have read or heard about sort of, World Bank has been caught up in a controversy and many, controversies over time on, if you start putting a value on the number of people who have died in different countries, are we putting a value on a person's life or death? And are we then saying also, because these values vary by country, that people in low-income countries are worth less? So this, this kind of work tends to open you up sort of into very sort of controversial areas, so much so that, some World Bank chief economists have lost their jobs over these kinds of controversies. Now, in order to do what we wanted to do, we had to sort of we had to put a number, right? We had to put an economic estimate on the health costs. And in order to try and avoid falling into this kind of controversy, we made it very clear and very upfront that we were not using these numbers for ranking, right? But we were just trying to give, within a country, we were trying to give policymakers a way to estimate what was the damage that was being caused. So when we reported our numbers, we didn't use it to rank different countries. We also, when we developed this methodology, we developed in a very, very transparent and open manner. In fact, we have a supplement to our report, which is just a methodology note, which lays out all the pros and cons and why is it that we made certain decisions. And we are also trying to, in this methodology note, if there's any interest, you can see that we really grounded this in what countries are doing themselves. So this wasn't something that the World Bank was trying to sort of come in and dictate, but these are approaches that the countries themselves are taking. And we just tried to bring some uniformity to that. But just a little bit of an anecdote, just a few days before we were going to launch our study, this became a big controversy. And, again, these questions were being raised. Are you trying to imply that the people in low-income countries, their life is worth less? And so we had to be very careful in the way we communicated this information. In our report, we had to have a number of sort of qualifying statements to explain what we were trying to do and why we were not, people should not draw these conclusions. And so it, came down sort of to the 9th hour, but eventually we did manage to get over that because we were very transparent about what we were trying to do. And next slide, please. So coming back to the report and how did we take this report? So as I mentioned, the World Bank had recognized that countries were not focusing on this issue. This wasn't anybody's priority. We set out to do this report to try and strengthen the economic case for air pollution, try to handle the sort of controversial issues in an open and transparent manner. Now, when the report was released, and of course, you're all familiar with this, this kind of an approach, we had both an internal and an external push in the media. Well, external in the media and then internal within the World Bank as well. And we did a number of infographics. We got actually in tremendous coverage in the media, because at the end of the day, when the World Bank comes out with a report that puts sort of some numbers on the table, that tends to get a lot of media coverage. If we make sort of statements, oh, air pollution is a big challenge, that by itself, we have found, doesn't get the kind of traction one would want to get. And it's when we come out and sort of put economic numbers on the table, that's when we tend to get a lot of media coverage. Now, the advantage of that media coverage was that along with sort of the internal push that we made. So what we did internally was we produced a number of country notes. Now, the reason I'm talking about an external audience and an internal audience is because we don't just have to sort of work and convince countries. A lot of what I do is to try to convince within the World Bank that this is an important agenda that the World Bank should be focusing on, that our country teams should be focusing on. so part of my job is to convince and work with countries, with our what we call our client countries. But part of my job is also to create the internal constituency that these issues are important. So we did a massive push internally, and we did a massive push externally. And what this then led to was, you know, obviously this is not the only factor that led to change, but you know, along with other factors, now the World Bank actually has a very large program. We are working across the regions, and in particular, we've always had air quality management programs in Latin America, but today we have very large air quality management programs all over the Middle East and North Africa, which we didn't used to have. We also have actually in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, we are increasingly helping and working with countries. We of course have a very large program in China. And as I mentioned, now we are starting to develop a very large program in India. So again, I don't want to take credit for the increase. There was many, many things that happened and many, many colleagues, very large teams that have worked on it, but we are in a very different place today. So this report was one of the pieces that helped strengthen the case for the World Bank. So a lot of what I do, and this is what I want to get across to you, is to try and convince people that what we are doing is important and that it is fundamental to the mission of the World Bank. Next slide, please. So, you know, all of this push to try and strengthen the economic case for action on air pollution led us in, as I mentioned earlier, right, we have the CPFs, with the country partnership frameworks, which determine the partnership between the World Bank as well as our partner countries. And in the CPF in India, today, which was actually the CPF goes from 2018 to 2024. So that's the period over which the CPF is relevant, this particular CPF. The India CPF has a standalone objective on working with Government of India on air quality. And this has never happened before. World Bank country partnership frameworks have had pillars on environment, on natural resources, have focused on those issues, but never a standalone objective that we need to work with countries to reduce air pollution, right? So this kind of push that we made helped sort of make the case, and then we were able to convince our country teams that this is something that we should be focusing on. And this, like I said, they tend to be the gatekeepers. They will determine what is it that we do in the country. And unless we get our foot into the door and have a place on the table with our country teams, we can't really work on issues in the country. So we now, so having gotten this, having gotten the standalone objective for air pollution in our country program, we thought we were done. So we said, now we have the mandate to work on air pollution. But, next slide, please. We then realized that we still had to convince Government of India. And this, I just want to emphasize this, because just because the World Bank decides that this is an important issue, that we should be working on this with our country, that doesn't mean the country thinks that the World Bank should be doing this. And so our job is not just to convince the World Bank teams that this is important. We equally have to convince Government of India that World Bank is the partner of choice for this particular issue. So having gotten sort of the okay from the country team in India that yes, this is an important issue, I want you guys to work on this, we still had to convince Government of India. And that led to almost a 2-year effort. And again, I just want to emphasize that just because we think it's important and we think we have something to add to Government of India's programs, that doesn't mean we get to work on those issues. We have to show Government of India, and in the case of India, we actually have to get a formal request from the Ministry of Finance for us to work on a particular issue. So we started off in 2017, we launched a 2-year program of building this partnership and building this sort of request from Government of India. to start working. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip over some of this because I want to focus on what it is that we are doing. So, and then finally, so we built a sort of sector team within the World Bank, which is actually one of our strengths, right? We have environmental economists, but we also have agricultural economists, we have health specialists, we have energy specialists. So we built a team that could, sort of make the case of why Government of India should be working with us. We started working with Government of India, sort of providing informal technical assistance. And we also engaged very deeply with a coalition of partners within India. We worked with civil society organizations, with a number of different NGOs. And then finally, in about 2019, we got, and this is, I've given you a glimpse, this is the kind of letter we get, that the Department of Economic Affairs, which is in the Ministry of Finance in the Government of India, sent us a letter, and Mr. Ahmed is our country director in India, sent him a letter saying, we have now approved this and we would like the World Bank to work. So now, finally, in 2019, we were in business to start working in India, to start working on a policy issue to have impact. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a glimpse of what it takes for us to start working on a particular program, to start having impact, and what sort of that journey is. Next slide, please. So now coming to what is it that we are actually doing with the Government of India. And there's a number of things that we're doing. As I mentioned, we're working to help shape policies and programs. We're helping Government of India implement some of their programs on the ground, and we're also trying to build capacity. But I just want to give you a glimpse into a few activities and outputs, so to give you some concrete examples of what we're doing and what impact we're having. Next slide, please. So one of the things that Government of India looks to the World Bank is to bring sort of, because we work across in many countries, they want us to sort of provide experience from other countries, sort of what is it that they can draw on from other country experiences. A lot of what we do is to sort of share the knowledge across countries and best practices. So just actually a few weeks ago, we published a report called Clearing the Air, A Tale of Three Cities, that provides draws lessons on how Mexico City, Beijing, and in the past New Delhi cleaned their air, and what lessons can other countries draw from it. Now that sort of is a very sort of general assessment, but we also did some deep dives into data, which have helped really inform our air quality program in India. And this, very simple sort of analytics here, nothing sophisticated. So one thing we did was we mapped, and this is what the graph is in the middle of this slide. We mapped sort of per capita GDP against the mean annual PM 2.5. And the one thing I want you to see from this graph is, and what we learned is India, and so you see India, Nepal, and Pakistan are in the leftmost corner of this chart and the top. And what this is showing is that India is actually on a very pollution intensive growth path. And this was kind of a mystery. We were wondering what is going on in South Asia to really put them on this. So this very simple sort of graph sort of revealed this dynamic of what was going on in India. And as we describe in our report, what we discovered was, tends to be a lot of focus on urban sources of air pollution across the world, and including in India. And we found that in order to explain this very high pollution intensity of India's growth path, the only way to explain that is that rural sources of air pollution are actually equally important in India. So this is, of course, as we know, household use. I mean, that very sort of red area of India that I showed you that has very high levels of air pollution, that is also one of the most densely populated area of India, and very sort of not highly urbanized. And so indoor household use of biomass is contributing and leading to this sort of very high intensity. Of course, the urban sources are also there, power plants, industry, traffic are all contributing. But so in India, what's happening is you have both the rural and the urban sources. And in the rural sources, you actually also have, I won't go into it now, but happy to do it at another time. Tends to be other sources that are coming from rural areas as well. And sort of this very simple analytics help us sort of draw that conclusion. So what India really needs is sort of this multi-sector intervention and not just a focus on transport, which has tended to be the way India has approached air pollution management in the past. So this is one of the things we do, sort of deepening knowledge in these areas. Next slide, please. Then we also do work to help inform government programs. Now, Government of India actually has a very, very innovative effort to incentivize cities to reduce air pollution. India has what is called the Finance Commission, which is a constitutionally mandated body that is established every 5 years to recommend how tax revenue is shared between the federal government and the state. So this is sort of a domain of the finance ministers and ministries, and some, a domain that we don't often come into interaction with. However, the 15th Finance Commission, which is the Finance Commission that is currently in play, that commission put forward a very innovative program, which was that they are going to give grants to cities to incentivize, and these are performance-based grants, to incentivize a reduction in air pollution. So they've created a very large pot of money, annually about $500 million. And based on the record of the city on how much it's able to reduce air pollution, they will get a share of this pie. So sort of a performance-based grant system, which truly is a big innovation. Now, this Finance Commission, we had the opportunity to actually make a presentation to this Finance Commission. And the report of this Finance Commission is not out yet, so we don't know how they have made a decision. But what we wanted the government to do is to not just focus on the cities. As I mentioned in the previous, we found that both rural and urban sources are contributing to air pollution. So just focusing the grants on the cities is not going to help you solve the problem. You also have to make money available outside the cities to tackle the problem. So this is what we made this case to the Finance Commission, that you should make some of that money available outside the cities to help the cities reduce air pollution. So we'll see whether that eventually plays out, and if the Government of India is able to take that on. But that's sort of the kind of work that, just to give you a glimpse of the kind of work we do. Next slide, please. And then I also want to show you that we do what, of course, EFD researchers do a much better job, and then, you guys have tremendous depth and breadth on these issues. But we also do work which is considered sort of more traditional research, right? So at the moment, I'm working on a paper with some World Bank colleagues to understand air pollution trends across Indian cities. And we're doing a time series analysis. And here are some of the results. One of the things that we have found is that air pollution actually, there's all these stories about how poor air quality is in India, and it is, in certain times, but there is an underlying trend. From 2018, actually, air pollution has been across the entire country, air pollution has been declining. And this is sort of a trend, the time series analysis that we are doing across 63 cities in India is showing this. And this is just a glimpse into some of the results of that analysis. Next slide, please. So I just want to finish. I know I'm already probably gone over, but I just, hopefully this sort of gives you a little bit of a glimpse into the world, my world, of an environmental economist at the World Bank, of how we go about and why we work on certain issues and how we work on those issues. But I just wanted to sort of take a minute to share some ideas on how is it that we could work together with EFD. Of course, I'm sure you guys have other ideas as well, and maybe these won't make the final cut, but just to get this conversation going. So one thing is, I hope I've got conveyed to you, we often have to sort of fight for a place on the table, right? And so it's really useful for us to have this kind of evidence on how, say, air pollution is costing the economy, and sort of really drawing the implications of, say, it could also be in the sphere of natural resources. It could be how poor poor management of natural resources is causing a loss in revenue to governments, right? They really need to see sort of these environmental issues put into economic terms. So to the extent that researchers can help make that case, it'll help us also sort of make that case within to finance ministries, but even within the World Bank. So that is some, if the more that researchers create that evidence, the more, we can also do push for these issues within the World Bank and with our client countries. But then I also wanted to mention some specific ideas. Maybe I will share this presentation. I know I've run over time, Gunnar. So I'm not sure if I should go into any detail here. I'll wait for you to tell me. But I just wanted to mention that apart from air pollution, I do a lot of work on watershed management, as well as on nature-based tourism, and have a number of sort of ideas on how we could collaborate in each of these areas. But maybe I'll stop here, Gunnar, because I know I've run over time. So we could take this up later. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Urvashi. It's really, really exciting to see this work. And of course, it's particularly pertinent for EFD and the EFD researchers, given that our objective is exactly to bring knowledge into these kinds of policy processes. Now, I was brought up, and then this is kind of more a declaration to everybody else, you know it already, but I was brought up during a period when there was the favorite pastime was bank bashing, particularly on the environmental scene. But I must admit that particularly where I've been working in Africa, the World Bank has turned out to be kind of the opposite to Trump when it comes to bringing research and knowledge and these kinds of methodologies into policy action. The World Bank is actually the best resourced institution to bring that to the agenda. So we have started to get a few questions, but just to kind of take on where you were ending and bring that a little bit further, I must say that, for some of us watching you and the kind of resources you have, and also, I mean, we've been seeing when you put your whole panel of, a dozen PhDs in a particular area in a video conferencing, bashing, then one wonders, what really is the role of the local researchers in this? You were starting to touch on it at the very, very end of your presentation, but for example, when you talked about this systematic country diagnostics and the country partnership frameworks and so on, I mean, from our perspective, it's primarily been on the country environmental analysis, etc., where the EFD researchers have come in. So maybe while I'll skim through the questions here in the Q&A, you can start by just elaborating a little bit on where you see the possible roles of local researchers in the countries, how they could, for example, bring this to the attention of the policymakers or whatever.
Great, thanks, Gunnar. So yeah, I think one, as you mentioned, so I know we worked collaboratively with EFD on a number of these country environmental analyses. And that tends to be sort of once we have that information, that actually helps us make the case, right? So then once you have those country environmental analyses, then we can make the case that this is important and we can help get that issue into the SCD, the Systematic Country Diagnostic, right? So a CEA, the Country Environmental Analysis, tends to be an input into the SCD, because we can show credible information, and then we can fight for that issue in the SCD, and therefore in the country partnership framework, right? So this tends to be, a CEA will be sort of important evidence that we can use for this in our, to make the case. But also, you know, in terms of roles of local partners, I want to give you an example. We are doing this study with the University of California at Davis to assess the economic impact of tourism in protected areas on local economies, right? This is basically what we're doing, is we're developing localized computable general equilibrium models to understand if a extra dollar, or there's an extra tourist in the area, what impact does it have on the local economy, right? Now there is a set methodology that Ed Taylor at UC Davis has developed, and we wanted to apply that approach. But we are doing this in 4 countries, and each country, we have local partners. So for example, one of the countries we're doing the study in is in Nepal. And there we are partnering with the Kathmandu University on 2 levels. One is Kathmandu University. Local enumerators were required to collect the primary data. And Kathmandu University students were then hired to do that. And then, of course, on the, just doing the policy analysis, understanding the context, is also being done in collaboration with Kathmandu University. So we tend to partner with local universities and local partners. And so working together on studies is another way in which we can collaborate.
Fantastic. So there are more and more questions now. You were mentioning this finance commission and kind of incentivizing this change. There is a specific question here from Yana Jin on the news. India launches world's first particular emission trading. And the question is India interested in using market-based instruments to control air pollution? Any progress on news? And in particular, I mean, there are so many, Thomas is listening into you and many others working specifically on policy instruments. So what is the role, how hard are you pushing market-based instruments?
So, this is the work that, Rohini Pandey and colleagues are doing, right, in the state of Gujarat, and very innovative, and we are trying. Now, the problem is the Air Act, right, which provides the legal basis for air pollution management in India, does not allow the use of market-based instruments. So, unless you actually have a change in policy and legislation, we can be pushing market-based instruments, but they will be on very shaky legal grounds. So as far as we are concerned, we are very much saying to Government of India that, yes, you need to move and use market-based instruments. But we also recognize that you need a fundamental change in policy and legislation in order to make that happen. So it's not an easy solution to say, hey, Government of India, start using more market-based instruments, right? While we are arguing that Government of India should do that, and we're sharing lessons from across the world and where it's been effective to say, but we're also noting that without a fundamental change in the policy and legislation, Government of India can't really do this. And so, our work is both trying to understand the overall policy and legislative environment in which Government of India operates, and then some specific sort of policy interventions. And so we're doing it at both levels.
So I think we'll squeeze, so the parallel sessions will start in 8 minutes. So we'll need to finish up in 3 minutes, but I think I will try to push in one quick question, which was actually the first one. Dipendra Bhattarai is saying, what do you think about the transboundary air pollution issues? For example, Nepal getting most of the air pollution from India in the winter. And you plan to involve the regional countries? If yes, how? So you've been touching upon that in your presentation, but you haven't really elaborated on kind of the regional aspects.
So again, yes, we have actually, South Asia is the least regionally integrated region in the world, right? And one of the big mandates of the World Bank in South Asia is to promote regional integration, right? But again, if countries don't want to be integrated, there's nothing that the World Bank can do. So but we have actually, in the next few months, we are coming out with a very large regional study on air pollution, which will make the case, right, that in order for countries, each country doing it by itself is not as cost-effective way of tackling air pollution as compared to a situation where countries are partnering with each other and working regionally. So our role in this is to, first of all, bring the evidence to the table to make the case that regional integration, because, just like, Nepal is saying India is polluting, is sending polluted air. India says, oh, Nepal has such poor poor fuel. We have moved to Euro 6 and Nepal is still stuck on poor fuel. So why, maybe it's Nepal's problem. So unless you have good data and sound analysis, this becomes very much a finger pointing business, right? And so our role is to try and work. In fact, we are doing this in collaboration with researchers across from each of these countries. In India, for example, we are working with IIT Delhi to make this to provide evidence that can then inform this kind of dialogue. But, very much, this is hopefully a goal for the World Bank to try and support, but it all will depend on the kind of leadership that exists in the countries for this kind of a program.
So thank you so much. So there is a lot of activity here in the background, because now we need to wrap up this first keynote. A big round of applause for you. I'll clap for everyone, more than 100 people listening in, because we need to close this in order to catch the recording and open the next parallel sessions.